Well, hello again. This is Pastor Dan Smith. I'm still a pastor, even though I have changed positions in the last little bit from being a pastor, senior pastor of a church, to actually be working with pastors and working with evangelism all around the southeastern part of California and really ultimately around the world. We have things planned for Philippines and Thailand and Zimbabwe next year. Got requests for India and other places this next year, so who knows where I will all be. But we will still be here, Flame of Truth and LLBN. We have a partnership we're not going to let go. So I hope that you'll keep following this program. We'll figure out a way to tie this to an internet and a website, and much to be worked out. But this last Saturday, as I am taping this, was my last Saturday at La Sierra University Church. And so I'm just going to share with you most of what I shared with them. Church was full. Everybody came. I baptized 12 people, and of course all of their friends and relatives came, and people who have moved away had come back, and everyone was here all at once. What a wonderful time we had. Though it was very bittersweet. It's hard to leave church. So we've known for 3 or 4 months that this transition was coming. And eventually here it was, September 13 was the day. So eventually we'll have to revise the introduction to this show, and we'll have to have some new identity, and I'll have to get comfortable with a new persona. But I am a pastor, and this is what I've been for a long time. And so we'll have to find a way to shift. Still Pastor Dan, and we'll look forward to continuing to preach the gospel in new and different ways on this program. But the time has come for me to hand it off to someone else. I found a story. One pastor was leaving his church and finished his message, came down to the door, shaking hands for the last time. An old lady came by and she said, "You know, the one who follows you is just not going to be as good as you." The pastor felt good, but didn't want to accept that. Said, No. And the old lady said, "Oh, no, I think so. I've been here under 5 different pastors, and each one has been worse than the last." So, pastoring is difficult, but it's so special. And I have been greatly blessed to be at the La Sierra Church and to be a pastor for all this time. We had a wonderful service, and people, all the worship committee, and everybody pulled out all the stops and did the very best they could do. And what a special day. Then they had a farewell for us at night. And here the whole cafeteria at our university was full, way beyond what the fire code would allow, people standing everywhere. I felt so bad. But long line to just let me hug them and love these people. The church is special. Special to me. We love the church. Well, let me talk about church maybe this time. As I was working towards that last message, I just couldn't get past the specialness of church. Some things can happen that are hard, but it is more than worth it when you add up all the incredible things. So this sermon is called, "Is It Really Worth It? Is Church Worth It?" I brought back an old story that you've heard about the old Scottish couple flying from Edinburgh to New York. I'll tell it quickly just for those of you that haven't heard it. They're flying in the middle of the night. The captain's voice comes, and one of our engines has burst into flame. But now, don't worry, we've had to turn it off, but this plane can fly on 2 engines. But now we'll be a couple hours late to New York. There was a little talking. We gradually quieted down until 2 hours later, the captain came on again and said, "A second engine has burst into flame. We've had to feather that one. But don't be afraid. These planes have been designed to make it on 1 engine all the way. Happened several times." Well, this time there's a lot of hubbub in the plane. But over it all, you could hear that old Scottish woman shouting into her husband's ear, "If that last engine goes, we'll be up here all night." Well, I've had fun with that over the years, but to turn it a little bit this time, can we make it on just the 1 engine of Jesus and grace? Or is there at least another engine we're going to have with it, which is the engine we call the church? So many people will say to me, I'm a spiritual person, but I'm really not religious. Meaning they're not into organized religion. They don't want all the church, the organized meetings and the people and the politics and all the rest of it. They just want to be spiritual and hang out with God. Is it a choice? Can you be an unchurched Christian? Or do you have to have two engines, at least, to make it over to the other side? There was a man who got shipwrecked on an island, and he, after several years on the island, finally got picked up on a boat. As the boat is leaving, they're looking back at their island, and the captain saw 3 huts there. You've heard this story. And the captain said, "What are the 3 huts?" And the man said, "Well, the first one, that's where I lived. I built the second one, that was my church. What was the third one?" "Well, that was my church after I got mad at the other one and left." He's all by himself on an island in a church, and he can't keep it together with one church. Stuff happens in church. Stuff happens. Church can drive you crazy, whether it's politics, or it's boring, or they're after money, or there's hypocrites, or the church leaders don't seem to be listening, or it's prejudiced, or it's got racial segregation, or whatever, something that gives someone an excuse to say, "I don't need church anymore," and to stay away. Too bad. Too bad. We caused it. I caused some of it. Sorry for that. Apologized to my church for whatever I've done to contribute to anything like that. Crazy things. I could make a long, I could write a book. I should write a book. I was down in Jamaica, stood up to preach. Another crazy man jumped in, began to preach at the same time. Luckily, some deacons ushered him out. It was a little difficult. One of my first Sabbaths at La Sierra, and someone with long hair and kind of didn't dress too well, t-shirt, was waiting in the back, waiting for his girlfriend to come out in the choir, and one of my saints said, "Young man, you really need to wait outside. You're not dressed appropriate for church." And we had to send a letter out to everybody. "You can dress. We'll take you any way you are. Church is always open to you." Stuff that happens in church. And I've told stories about baptisms. I've told all kinds of things that have happened. One lady told me the other day that they had a big evangelistic series of meetings someplace. And back in those days, they would try to get all the jewelry. They had a couple verses from the King James Bible. Seemed to imply that people should not have any wearing of gold and silver. So they were trying to get all the jewelry off these people. Well, evidently they had a box of this jewelry, didn't know what to do with it, brought it to our church headquarters, which is close to where my church has been at La Sierra, and now where I will be working. And they brought this box. Well, someone got the idea, well, we should sell it and turn it into cash we can use for the work of the church. So, of course, they put up a sale, and who bought it? Church people. I assume they wore it. So we just moved the jewelry from one person to another, and then we got some money out of it. How do these things happen? They don't make sense. They're not right. And they drive people away from the church sometimes. And someone asks, is it really worth it? Is there enough good to make up for the bad? Do we really have to have the church just along with Jesus? Or can we just have Jesus and grace and don't need the church to go with it? Well, what do you think? One missionary went down to Venezuela, brand new, first week. Didn't know how to speak Spanish, went to church. And he figured out he better just sit by somebody and do whatever they did because he couldn't make out what was happening. And so when that man clapped, he clapped. When that man stood up, he stood up. When he sat down, he sat down. Well, all of a sudden he looked over and the man stood up. So he stood up. Everyone in the church gasped. Then he looked around and realized no one else was standing up, so he sat down. When the whole church was over, the speaker came to him and he spoke English. Said, I gather you don't know how to speak Spanish. Well, no, I don't. Was it that obvious? He said, well, I announced that the Acosta family had a brand new baby boy, and would the proud father please stand up? And you stood up. So, too bad, too bad. Things happen in church. We could write a book. There have been times when I thought about giving up on the church. I went to a meeting at the Spanish church that was close to us years ago. We were having an area-wide meeting, and we call them constituency meeting. And I happened to be sitting with a person who at that time was the president of our university. He's a saint of God. I've never seen him get upset, just a righteous, godly, gentle, good man. And the pastor from that particular church at that time, and for some reason, I don't remember what the issues were at all, that pastor was upset at our La Sierra University. And he began to stand up and speak, some critical things. And of course, my president wanted to defend the university and leaned past me to try to explain. That pastor began to, and it got difficult. I finally stopped it, and we just left. Walked out into the parking lot. And for a moment, the president said to me, just in frustration, he'd been on a plane all night from working over in Jordan and doing something for God and doing archaeology and digging, and had no sleep and just exhausted and trying to defend his university that is a wonderful place. And he finally just said, if that's the church, if that is the direction the church wants to go, they can just have it. If they're going to be so extreme and so difficult and so critical and so unthankful and ungrateful for what the university is doing. And I just said to him, you can't leave. You can't let them have the church. If you let them have it, then the church becomes what they are, and they win. You can't go. And he said to say the same thing to me sometimes. As a young pastor, there were some theological controversies that washed through our church. I was a young pastor out in the hills of Southern Oregon, reading all these bootleg versions. We would go to the copier and copy these bootleg things off and read every word. I didn't know what to make out of all this. And I thought some of my friends began to leave the church and decide the church wasn't worth it anymore. And I finally decided I was going to stay. Nothing was going to drive me out. As long as they gave me a pulpit and I could still try to make a difference to make the church all that it ought to be, I would try to stay with the church. And so this last weekend, as I came down to the end of my time with that particular church, I said I want to talk about church. And I preached from Hebrews chapter 12, starting with verse 1, where it says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." Talking about the church, this great cloud of witnesses. Most interpreters would say it's talking about Hebrews 11, the giants of faith, the hall of faith, Abraham and Moses and Daniel and Noah and all the rest. This church is cloud of witnesses, and the idea is a relay race around a track. And one runs, and then he hands it off to the next one. And while they are running, he doesn't leave the stadium and say, okay, my race is over. The others would stand around the track and cheer the rest of the runners on and cheer until they're finished, until the race. The great cloud of witnesses, that's the church. The church. Other pastors were before me last year, great pastors, Dr. Heppenstall and Lynn Mallory, Maury Venden, Lau Heist just before me, went back to Australia. They handed the baton to me, and I've had it for 14 years. Did some good things, made some other mistakes, had my chance to be a pastor of a great church for 14 years. Now is my time to hand off the baton to someone else. Tomorrow night, as I'm taping this, the church board will meet, and they will pray, and they will ask God to send last year another pastor, who somewhere God has prepared that person to come and be a great pastor, to take the church to the next level from where, by God's grace, I was able to go, and be strong in areas that I was not so strong. And we will hand it on. It would have been wonderful if I could have finished the race. I could have been the one till Jesus comes. But he hasn't come. Can't do it forever. Got to let someone else. People need to hear another voice. Students need to hear maybe someone younger. So fine. Let's pass it on. Maybe the next pastor will be the one to be the last one. So now is my time to get off by the side of the track and cheer the next one on. The church. And for 2,000 years, really back thousands of years, the full church, back to the Old Testament, has kept every generation. It's never died. It's never stopped. Because someone has passed it on. The church. The church. Someday it's going to be like Carl Lewis and winning the Olympics, where they would hand off the baton to him and he'd be back behind the Russians. And then he would be Carl Lewis and just finish the race. Someday there's going to be an anchor leg. And there's going to be a time when the race is over and someone's going to go over to the other side and get a flag. And they're going to run around and we're all going to cheer because the race is over. And the church will walk into heaven. Hebrews 11, 38 and 39 and 40 says, "The giants of faith had not received their reward, but together with us will they be made perfect." We will all walk in together. No one gets more heaven than another. We will get all of God together face to face. The church, it's church. And then it says in verse 2, "Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and so on. For the joy that was set before him. What is this joy that was set before him, that he would go through the cross? We believe that there was a plan for sin thousands of years ago. Grace was there before sin. People think that somehow grace is a response to sin. No, grace is before sin. Just in case God had a plan. Grace was always there. Revelation 13 verse 8, behold the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Hebrews 13 verse 8, Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's always grace. There's always been a plan. Jesus Christ was always willing to come. Somewhere back there, how this all worked, Trinity made a plan in case there was sin. And Jesus says, I'll be the one to go. I'll be the one. I'll be the one. For thousands of years, Jesus knew there would be a day when he would have to say goodbye and come down. We have known for 4 months that there would be a September 13 when we would be done. Been a pit in our stomach the whole time to break away from people that are precious to us. Jesus went through thousands of years waiting for the day when he would have to say goodbye. I had to say goodbye to people this weekend. We're not moving away, but I won't be their senior pastor. We won't have the same every week relationship anymore. Have to say goodbye. Finally came the day, all of heaven lined up there at the gates of heaven. All the angels and Jesus began to go down the line one by one. I don't know how many there were. Angels, they've been together for thousands of years. Every one of the angels bowed down and said, let me be the one. Why should you have to go? You stay here. I will go. I will be the one. Jesus had to say, no. The angels only have life from him. It has to be someone with life within himself in order to have life to pay for everyone. Make it all right. Life in death to give us life. Finally comes down to God the Father. We understand that it's all one, but within the oneness of the Trinity, there is a plurality. There is a let us make man in our image. Somewhere there is love and bondedness between these three parts, persons, faces of the Trinity. They have been together forever, for trillions of years, bonded together forever. And now it's going to be ripped up. Goodbye. Goodbye. It is love that we will never understand, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. I know what it's like to stand by the side of my house and say goodbye to someone who a few years before had stood up in front of a preacher and said, I will love and cherish you forever, but somehow didn't seem to want to do those things anymore. I know what it's like to get on an airplane with my family, my parents and my brothers, and say goodbye to my grandparents. My grandfather used to get on the plane there in Los Angeles, right under the plane back then, and help put the bags away. And then we would say goodbye, tears streaming down. My grandfather, my father. 5 years we'd be gone to Thailand for missionaries. My brother and I stayed here for college one time and had to say goodbye to my parents and my brothers, knowing we wouldn't see them for 2 years. Well, we stayed for college. Difficult. Many times we would gather together. My grandfather, Vendon, some of you know the Vendon name. We would be in a living room and we would say goodbye and we would pray. And then my grandfather would pray. Heartbreaking. We would say goodbye, not see them for years. And there's nothing to the goodbye between the Father and the Son. Why did he do it? For the joy that was set before him, for the church. For the church. That's what it's all about. Right, Dallas Holm wrote the song Rise Again, and it says, go ahead, drive the nails in my hands, because I'll rise again. Ain't no power on earth can tie me down. Yes, I'll come again. Why? Come to take my people back. That's the joy that was set before him, to take my people back. That is in the heart of God. The whole point of the whole Bible is the church. The whole point is to get people back, to get God's church back to him up there in heaven. That is the whole point, the church. He comes down here, he chooses 12 disciples. Why? Even God needs a church. He comes down to the Last Supper. Why does he have a Last Supper? For the church. We had a Last Supper the other night for all of the pastors who have worked with me over the years. The church. Church. They want it to end. Hard to get people to go back to their cars. We wanted to last all night. These people that have been precious to us, the church. Jesus comes down to the Garden of Gethsemane. He wants his disciples to pray with him. He needs it. Jesus himself needs a church. He finally goes on the cross. And he dies, goes through the whipping and the nails and the thorns and the spear. Why? For the joy that was set before him with the church. And then he comes back down 40 more days. Why? He's already in heaven. Why would he come back down? For 40 more days he wanted to be with the church. Just the church, the disciples, the church. It says in John 14, I make a place, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that where I am, there you may be also. These are people that are going to run away from him, one deny him, one betray him, who couldn't do anything right spiritually. And then he says, I'm coming back for you. I'm going to spend a couple thousand years and prepare a place for you because I want you to be with me forever, forever. It's a great picture of God, the church. He wants us. It's in the heart of God to be with you and me, the church. How can we say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious? I don't need the church. That's why I can't give up a church. If it was worth it to Jesus, it's worth it to me. Ephesians 5:25, it says, Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. He loves the church. Somebody told me last week in the show about 9/11, 7 years since 9/11. There was a man from England originally, came over here, was a Vietnam vet, Rick Rescorla. You can go onto the web and read about him if you want. He was in charge of the security at Morgan Stanley there in World Trade Center. He had had times in Vietnam where people, they had to leave him behind to die. Other people he held in his arms and died. He said, I'll never leave someone behind to die again. When 9/11 hit, there were people who said, all stay in your offices, don't move. He said, no, we're getting out. He had practiced this, trained them, and began to go up and down the floors with a bullhorn. Come on, get out. Stay calm, get out. Someone said to him on the 10th floor, you ought to get out yourself. No, wait till I get everyone out. Big, heavy man. He didn't get out. But of 2,700 people, only 6 died. And 4 of those 6 were his own team following his model. Why did he do it? Why did he give his life? For the people. To get them out so they wouldn't die in a fire. Why did Jesus die? He died for the church, for the joy that was set before him. So people wouldn't have to die in a fire in hell someday. That they would get out and they would be able to live the rest of their life. That's why he did it. He called his wife before he died and he said, if something happens to me, know that I've never been happier. And then he hung up and he died. It's an amazing story. Why he decided to not give up on the church. The church can give up on me, but I'm not giving up on the church. I've gone all over the world telling young people and everybody, no matter what gossiping, no matter what hypocrisy, and if they scare you or talk about the last days, or there's somebody who doesn't live up to their faith, or they hurt you, or say something against you, or they're after money too often, or whatever else, don't let anything drive you away from the church. Jesus Christ is there in Revelation 1 with all the candlesticks around him. In the middle, churches were not perfect. Jesus was there in the middle of the church. Never gets up on the church. It's his bride, it's his body, the church. The church. I can't give up on the church because it is where we deal with the big issues of the world. We talk about the big issues. Where else? I can't give up on the church because it is the most powerful force of change in the church. It is what wipes out slavery and fights against apartheid and all the other terrible things on the environment and all the rest. I can't give up on the church because it is the church that rolls up its sleeves and does the dirty work in the world. Shantung Compound, Langdon Gilkey in China. All these missionaries and all the business people were put in a school as a prison camp. 2 bathrooms for 2,000 people. No one cleaned it up. They were used to having servants. Finally, after 2 weeks, it was the missionaries, the Christians, the church, who wrapped handkerchiefs around their noses and went in and cleaned it up. Church does the dirty work in the world. But ultimately, I can't give up on the church because it's the people. It's the people. When I think about all the people that I've done church with, my Romans 16, I've preached on that here before. Paul says, greet so-and-so, greet so-and-so. He sounds like he's greeting people, but he's really saying goodbye because he says, I don't know if I'm going to make it to Rome. If I don't make it to Rome, please tell all these people hello. The people who were shipwrecked with me, people who did church with me, people, my first converts, people who brought me food in prison, his church. People sometimes skip that chapter of Romans. It is the heart of Romans. Don't call it a list, Paul would say. That's my church. I've gone all over the world. I have pastored in California and Oregon and Illinois and now California again. precious people. I think of all the dinners. I go to all the dinners. Last Saturday I went to 5 different dinners because people I baptized. I love it. People, church. I stood in line for hours hugging people Saturday morning, Saturday night. People that are precious to me, that I've buried their families. I've done weddings. I've been in their homes. I've answered their questions. I've done church with them, been on committees, watched their kids grow up. My kids have grown up with them. Church. Church. Can't give up on the church. It's precious. Can't give up on the church. If I could take anything to heaven with me, it would be the directories. First, the directory of small little churches in Oregon, a little bigger. Chicago, 1,300 members. Now La Sierra, 2,750. Big directory. Wish I could take those directories into heaven. Hebrews 12 finishes with 2 pictures of Mount Sinai and Mount Zion. And he says Mount Sinai stands for terror. People scared, thunder, lightning, God's voice rumbling down from the top of the mountain. Even Moses, it says, was terrified. And the people told Moses, don't let him talk to us again. Talk to you, but not to us. But then he says, you're not in Mount Sinai anymore. You have come to Mount Zion. You have come with all the angels, and you are celebrating God. And you know that your name is in the Lamb's Book of Life, and there's a mansion in heaven. And I asked everybody in this church, if you know that you have moved from Mount Sinai, law, never good enough, to Mount Zion, would you stand? The whole church stood. I gathered them all around me. People I've done church with for 14 years. And then I said, thank you for the honor of being with you. But now I hand you off to Jesus. And I pointed to the cross and I said, he died for the joy that was set before him, for you and for me. That's the church.